really, really forward to any Labour government, but especially this current. I'm very delighted we've got such a fantastic panel here to discuss this topic. But first off, I'd like to kick off with a video called Ladders of Opportunity.
The Jobs Foundation has spent the past 8 months travelling around the UK, speaking to companies large and small about what constitutes best practice in terms of hiring, training and retaining staff. Over that period, we have heard some incredible stories, listening to people's challenges as well as discovering the successes of where that great job can transform lives.
Dusty Knuckle is a bakery and cafe in London that aims to support 18 to 25-year-olds who have come adrift from their future and their plans to get back on track.
I came out of prison in 2022. I was looking to change my life. Started here as a trainee and currently I'm a front of house supervisor and a junior caseworker, ensuring that the young people that come from the training program have what they need to make sure that they get through here and they get the skills that they need for their future.
Rupa launched in 2004 and we've supported over 50,000 people through our March and Start programme.
If they're successful through the programme, they are given a 16-week contract.
We've got somebody actually that they've developed through all the sort of store roles, so he's been a team support manager and he's now a store manager in one of our stores in the region, which is brilliant.
At some point in their career, I know the skills that they've gained through the employability session they'll be able to use.
I've been able to expand my knowledge on retail, confidence. I've been able to push myself out there. I had fun, I learned new information as well, developed skills that I already had, got a job, so well done me.
The Jobs Project, it changes lives and provides opportunities for young people. Different people have different gaps, so it's about identifying that gap, finding out what that barrier is, and then the young people developing and building on those skills.
I used to think that I didn't really want to work with people, but then during the Barnardo's course I realised, I actually quite like interacting with people. It's actually quite fun. This changed my life, knowing I've got this here to be able to help me with money, get good experience behind me. Job helps you able to live, not just survive.
It was a bit of a shock to the system not to be employed. When you're used to working, you have an aim. The Short Trust actually gives me a little bit of that back. That's the hard bit, is being older and feeling useless, and so I'm not ready yet. I'll tell everyone when I am, but I'm not now.
I urge you to read our Ladders of Opportunity report, championing business as a force for good in society, supporting people onto that ladder of employment, which helps people escape a life of welfare dependency, starting a new life of pride and independence.
I think that video just really nicely summarises how important jobs and employment are and really nicely frames this discussion that we're about to have. But without further ado, I will introduce our panel. So we've got Lee Barron, the MP for Corby and East Northamptonshire and chair of the APPG on modernising employment. We've got Georgiana Bristol, the CEO of the Jobs Foundation, who we're very delighted today to be partnering with SME for Labour on this event. We've got Jazz Athwal, the MP for Ilford South, former leader of Redbridge Council. We have Douglas McWilliams, who was the chief economist of the CBI and the founder of the Centre for Economic and Business Research. And we're also very lucky to have Rupa coming along and joining us this morning. So George, let's kick off with you. Would you like to set out the mission behind the Jobs Foundation and why it's important for this policy area?
Absolutely. So many mics. I'm going to go with this one. Yes, so the Jobs Foundation, just to say, it's a charity. It launched several years ago now between myself and my co-founder, Matthew Elliott, who's sitting on the front row, kindly taking a photograph. We set up the Jobs Foundation to champion business as a force for good. It's work to lift people out of poverty and worklessness into great jobs and training. So just to put that into a nutshell about what the Jobs Foundation is. Over the course of the last 2 years, we have signed up maybe hundreds, in fact, now about 1,300 members to our business council. And what all those members of our business council do is they gave us great information, best practice information about how business can support people into work and fantastic training. And in fact, this is our most recent report that we launched about 2 weeks ago now, Ladders of Opportunity, which I think our Chancellor just said in her speech earlier, how top UK businesses create new routes into work. And as you saw with the film, essentially this report looks at different cohorts of people, whether it's younger people, older people, obviously a big issue post-COVID, long-term sick, businesses that have particular schemes that support groups into work, whether those be ex-offenders, people who are homeless, veterans, and of course we look at businesses that make a particular focus on employing people in their local communities, particularly businesses in areas of deprivation where that life raft of employment is so hugely important. So what I would say about the Jobs Foundation and as part of the conversation today is that we see day in, day out how fantastic business can be at supporting people into work. And I think that really goes to the heart of the Jobs Foundation's kind of mission and vision, that we want everybody, regardless of their circumstances, to be able to have a fair chance of getting into work and having that great career. And again, underlining something else our Chancellor said today, that it's the dignity of work, it's the potential, it's the opportunity that a job gives to that person that we at the Jobs Foundation are so passionate about.
Thank you, George. I think one of this government's most powerful ambitions is the ambition to get Britain working, so moving 2 million people from economic inactivity and welfare into good jobs. Obviously, that will only happen if we see higher economic growth. Douglas, do you want to set out why boosting economic growth is so important?
Thank you very much. I'm here to talk about a book. By the way, this is a mock-up, so don't nick it, because if you do, you won't get what it's meant to be. It's just something made to look like it, so it will go down nicely in the photographs. Thank you very much for inviting me, both sides of the invitation. May I say two things? One, why growth is important, and secondly, what the main points of this book are, because they're trying to explain how we can get the UK back to prosperity, taking account of the really different world that we're in, especially the world of AI, which makes it very different from where we used to be. First of all, the importance of growth, obviously living standards, and we've just done a calculation showing that if you're a young person starting work, in the modern world, if we've got no growth, your living standards may well peak in your early 30s. In the old days, it used to be in your mid-40s. Why is that? Well, if you if you tilt down the playing field, as it were, so you don't have the natural increase coming from growth, you only have the increase that goes with your skills. And a lot of things like coding skills and so on peak out when you're surprisingly young these days. So potentially your IT skills are not going to start improving very much by the time you're in your mid-30s. So getting growth makes so much difference to the growth in your living standards. Secondly, of course, jobs. And in an event sponsored by the Job Foundation, it would be important to draw attention to the importance of jobs, not just in the purely financial sense, but also in the sense of promoting well-being, promoting mental health, and promoting the giving people a sense of self-satisfaction, self-reward. Thirdly, growth, of course, is critically important, as I'm sure Rachel Reeves will tell you, to manage the fiscal problems of the country. Rachel Reeves' current plans are for government spending to rise by 19.3% by the end of the Parliament. She won't be able to pay for that with no economic growth. We will need growth to achieve that. In fact, growth is very highly geared to, tax revenue is very highly geared to growth. Each 1% extra GDP raises tax receipts by 1.5%. So it does make a huge difference. What does the book say? The book is a joint venture. Matthew over here, Matthew Elliott, Michael Hinsey, and the great Art Laffer have co-authored with me as well. The first part of it is about what the theory is about incentives and how you can operate incentives to promote an economy. The second part of it is a plan for growth. It's called the 24x7 plan for growth, and one of the particular focuses is how you can get growth early, because we appreciate that anyone starting today needs to move quite fast if they're going to get the political benefits of getting any growth. The third part of the book is a series of interviews. There were 35 interviews, of which 5 were with 5 of the 8 living former prime ministers and 9 of the 11 living former chancellors. And the extraordinary thing about the interviews, and frankly I'm amazed what they said, how willing they were to talk to us, and how when we offered them the chance to delete what they'd said, they didn't take the chance of deleting it, so it's still all there in the book. How prepared they were to say what they think you could do to overcome the political obstacles of doing things that in the short term look quite electorally unappealing. And they reckoned pretty well, all of them, that you could overcome that hurdle if you were sufficiently clever and showed a sufficiently clear idea of what you wanted to do. So that's what the book says, that's what the book does. I think that the best thing I can say to you is, please buy the book.
Thank you, Doug. I think one of the things that's really came through from what the government has published so far, so the Get Britain Working white paper and the green paper, is that combination of government working with business is going to be absolutely crucial if we're going to achieve that ambition of bringing 2 million people into work. Lee, I'll come to you on this one. How do you see the role of business in achieving this ambition?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of, sorry, it's not too loud. Just a couple of things from myself in terms of, what we've been doing as an all-party parliamentary group called Modernising Employment. And some of what I was saying might sound obvious, but it hasn't been the norm for about the last 10 to 15 years. And that is the simple sort of fact that work should be the route out of poverty. And for so many people, it isn't. And we've got to address that fact, because we can't have a situation any longer, if we are going to grow the economy, where from one week to the next, people don't know how many hours they're going to work or how much money they're going to work, because you can't build about that. And so we've got to get some fundamentals, I think, back, which is right. And not only that as well, start to challenge it. And this is where we put it into action. Now, in my constituency, in Corby and East Northamptonshire, in Corby, Nike are going to be building their UK headquarters. That sounds pretty exciting, a big name brand, big company and everything else. So we had a meeting with Nike, and we said to them, what about the jobs, how many they're likely to be and whatnot? It's about 1,200, and we said to them, that if you're coming here with insecure work, with 0 hours contracts, and we're going to tell you now we don't want you. We don't want those jobs here because we've got enough of them. What we want are good jobs, secure jobs, jobs where people can plan a future for themselves, for their family. And we sat down with them and started to go through with them what those jobs are going to look like. And what they've given us is the blueprint for their European headquarters, where over 50% of the staff there have got length of service of over 10 years, which is a retention rate to feel pretty good about, I would suggest. What we're doing next, and the next steps of this, is we're getting the DWP via the Job Centre to come meet with us and with Nike, so that they can explain to the Job Centre what skills they're going to be looking for when these jobs come. So we can start training the workforce now to make sure when those jobs come, when it opens, it's local people that are going to benefit and not having to pull people in from the outside. So I honestly think that it's about actions, and actions like that, where we're challenging what we don't want anymore because we're sick of them, putting down and laying the foundations for something that should be the norm, and making it the norm once again, and then delivering that kind of quality, because then you get that within your local economy, and that drives your growth. And this sort of stuff, I think, is what we need to do in getting our hands dirty, going out into the coalface, if you like, ourselves as politicians, to make sure we show that leadership locally, so that we get the jobs in the local economy that it is that we want to build, so we can be proud of it for the next generation, your kids' markets, to walk into something which is a bit better than what a lot of them have got now. And I think that there's a lot of good going on. I think the announcements today on the job guarantee for youth again is something else that we need to make sure is strengthened by that decent job standard. You know, the apprenticeships that we're going to need for the future that the government's planning, you know, I think is going to be crucial. And I think that that's how we deliver it. And I think it's up to local politicians, where we can, to influence and shape that change so it's a better future and a better jobs market for the people as we move forward.
Absolutely. Jazz and Rupa, I can imagine you've similarly got many experiences of businesses in your constituency that are on the ground creating these ladders of opportunity for people in employment. So Jazz, coming to you, how do you see that relationship between business and government coming together to help get Britain working?
Thank you. Thank you for being in such an esteemed panel. I think, first of all, listening to what the video said about the Job Foundation, the work they do, I think it is fantastic. In terms of the government and businesses coming together, there are so many things that can be done because there's no single silver bullet. It's going to be a collection of almost darts that we have to throw at the dartboard. And just looking at some of the schemes out there already, for instance, I think Pretz have a scheme called Rising Stars, where
In the report.
that's where I must have read it. But I just think it was such a good scheme that it was where they're giving the opportunity for youngsters, homeless people, without the qualification, haven't got the CV in front of them, to be able to apply for jobs and certainly get there. And I think we also need businesses to take a leaf out of some 40, 50 years ago when Microsoft were going to universities without trained, fully qualified individuals, but picking up the talent early and making sure that they gave them the jobs. And also in terms of just the culture that we have, that actually welfare doesn't pay. It's actually jobs that pay. It's jobs that actually get us, get the economy moving. It's jobs that give us a better quality of life. And I think if you do the maths, the London living wage and potentially somebody on benefits could almost be identical, and that can't be because it doesn't reward work. And I think what we have to do is make sure that it's work that pays, not actually being on benefits.
Absolutely. Rupa, do you want to come in on that point as well?
Yeah, thanks so much. So my name is Rupa. I'm the MP, Labour MP for Ealing, Central and Acton. And you said to sort of refer to businesses that we have in our seats. The APPG that I chair that's most relevant to this one is the one on BAME business, Black and Minority Ethnic. And in fact, in Ealing, Central and Acton, which also includes 2 wards of Hammersmith and Fulham, and it includes Chiswick and Shepherd's Bush, although they're not in the title, we have 8,300 businesses. 95% of those are SMEs. And when I'm talking about small and which is the umbrella organisation today, SME for Labour, some of these are micro businesses. Some of them are family businesses. Some of them one single person. And I remember this. I've been an MP now 4 general elections. I've done, although you could say that I've done 20 years in 10, because sort of we kept having them every 2 years in the beginning. 2015, 17, 19, 2021 came. I thought, where's my election? But it was COVID, so that kind of slowed things down a little bit. However, I remember the digitalisation through tax when when that came in under the last government. Putting on your tax digitally, some of our businesses don't have an accounts department, don't have all that, don't have an IT department. It's one person, it's a sole trader. So, I mean, I guess more help for those kind of sectors. I mean, the 3 of us who are MPs on this panel, we are employers as well, so that's a little known thing. So all these things, lifelong learning, the skills agenda, keeping people. So, I mean, I think this is a puzzle with a lot of different bits of it. But yeah, self-employed I will speak for. My father, I'm a child of SME, my father was an Indian restaurant person. And yeah, I think in the COVID years, they did feel left behind and excluded. We got these horror stories from the 3 million, the pressure group for them, of people sleeping in their car because they couldn't eat. I think there were 19 suicides around that period. So again, that was not just a COVID phenomenon. Those smaller things need support. In Ealing and Acton, we've had a creative enterprise zone from the Mayor of London. That could be interesting. I don't know what the net results are yet. We have a couple of business improvement districts. We have a lot of infrastructure. So again, infrastructure, those big projects. HS2, you may have heard of Old Oak Common. People are saying, where is this? This train line is stopping at some unknown place. It's not unknown, it's in my seat. It was a bit of a wasteland. It's the grounds of Wormwood Scrubs. Around there's a patch of, it's going to be 24,000 dwellings and pretty much a new town. So again, as Lee said, we want those jobs to go to local people. We don't want just a load of people being in from wherever, and they should be good quality jobs, apprenticeships, those kind of things. The stuff in the Chancellor's speech today, I like the bit about youth mobility. I was unlike some people in this room, an avid Remainer. My constituency, 75% voted Remain. People who work in financial passporting, tears in the playgrounds, a lot of EU nationals amongst my own school run or whatever. So I think there's something being loosened there. Nick Thomas Simon's doing various things. A youth mobility scheme. I'm a parent myself. My own son, I collected from his year abroad in Madrid over the weekend. He's starting his 3rd year today. I think, again, I was an Erasmus student. Those opportunities were brilliant. I worked in the university sector all my working life. The FP7, whatever they were called, the research funds, those kind of things that we had access. I think bit by bit, some access to some of those things we're getting back. And if I was going to be controversial, I would say that, we've had 14 years where it was seen, the orthodoxy was that you cut taxes, you strip back public services, and growth will somehow trickle down. And there is an argument that, biggest threat to growth, all these things, we could also look at inequality as well, inequality of opportunity, inequality of outcome, and I'm glad we've got a government now who gets this. So, it may not always be, the big threats are coming from overseas, from AI. It's a combination of all of the above. It's a complex picture, it's an amalgam. But yeah, and also lifelong learning. As someone who spent my whole life in universities until I was elected, higher education and lifelong learning, an acronym of which is HELL, unintentionally. So I will stop there. I don't know how long that's going to speak for. I used to lecture in 2-hour slots, so I could do that as well if you want, but you probably don't.
I think that's so powerful. They're talking about the SMEs in your constituency. But George, I know you could talk for all day on this, so I want to come to you and bring you in.
Well, I didn't know that about the acronym, I'm going to say, and I will remember that, definitely.
Okay, you can steal that on me.
I will.
We've got witnesses in this room.
I would just say one very, very quick point in terms of kind of government and business working together. But look, we know the government's national mission is getting 2 million people back into work. I'm not going to ever speak again. No, 2 million people back into work. Obviously this report and the Labs report very much focuses on businesses' kind of pathways into those different jobs. But of course, the other big thing is job creation, and it's just so important. And that's the biggest route to lifting people out of poverty are having enough of those jobs to give people and offer them that route out. And I think looking at the unemployment numbers at the moment, it's creeping up. So actually, probably to be slightly conservative on this, 2 million jobs is now fractionally out of date. So there's a huge amount to do in terms of supporting business so it can create those jobs. And I'm sure everyone who's come to panels in the last day or so should sort of almost have a shot every time this is mentioned. But we hear from businesses as part of the Jobs Foundation network that national insurance contributions and that rise is really, really tough, and it's terms of taking on new people into those kind of entry level roles, and so thinking about how best to have those conditions for business to thrive is, I would say is, very, very important.
And I think this is something that the Chancellor.
Lee has to go, by the way. Just to say that.
Running off already.
He's not walking off.
Thank you very much, Lee. But the Chancellor in her speech today was very explicitly linking moving people back into work and economic growth, which is I think something we can all agree with. But right now we look at the GDP figures; they're not as high as what we'd want them to be. Douglas, what do you think the number one single measure Rachel Reeves could introduce in her budget in November that would really kickstart economic growth and help get people back into work?
I think if you want to get economic growth running quickly very fast, you have to do it by bringing inward investment, which means, first of all, stopping people leaving the UK, and secondly, making them come in. Now, it's obviously, there's a complicated discussion going on about migration anyway, but I think there's the issue of migration of entrepreneurs and talented people is rather less controversial than some of the other migration issues. And it does seem to me that if you want to bring money in, you're going to have to bring people in with the money, and they're going to expect to pay obviously their fair share of tax on what they earn in the UK, but they may hope that they won't also be taxed on their earnings in other parts of the world, which quite a lot of international entrepreneurs, their money comes from all around the world, and they expect to pay their tax on what they earn elsewhere to the other governments, not necessarily to the UK government. So getting that fixed, I think, would be the first thing that would get the quickest result. And we're looking at a government now that's got 4 years left, roughly. To get things that will actually have an effect there, you really have to operate on the international side. You have to attract people in. Now, there is money waiting to come into the UK. We saw this at the time of the Trump visit. There's a lot of IT money, and there seem to be two things that the IT people are concerned about. The first is what I've talked about allowing the people to come in and not overtaxing them. The second is energy. If you look at the world of AI, the world of AI is inextricably linked with the world of big data. The current calculations suggest that more than half of the dispatchable grid energy capacity will be eaten up by big data by 2030. Now, that creates both an issue of price and it creates an issue of quantity, because what we don't want is big data centers being set up and the rest of us having power cuts because we can't actually supply them. So I think these are the things I'd start on. And then obviously the other things like planning. I mean, we really should do better than we're doing at planning. And I think we had a slightly false start when they thought it was the Tory shires being, the bad NIMBY Tories. There are some of them certainly, but they're not the main cause of the lack of development. The main causes are the plethora of different regulations which have basically killed the small house builder. And by killing the small house builder, they halve the rate of house building. We need to bring the small house builder back in conjunction with the other house builders, and what that will do is that will reinvigorate the housing market.
So the government has obviously made a start on things like planning reforms, as you mentioned, Doug, but I think there's a general acceptance that we need to be going much further and much faster on these things. Jazz, how do you see things like planning reform playing out over the next government? Reeves has pledged to do more on this front, but what kind of things would you want to see?
I think before I go into planning reform, I think some of the things, the blockages in investment, I just want to give you a real example. I was leader of the Council of London Borough of Redbridge, and we wanted to build a swimming pool. And I was told the swimming pool would not be anything under than £20 million. Well, that was the end of the swimming pool, there and then. So I went around the country, literally just scouring everywhere, and what we found was somebody had built a swimming pool for £4.5 million, but didn't have the intro into the procurement process. And once we'd seen the proof of concept, like a real live swimming pool, I asked the person to bid. And I did say to my officers, in which world do you not see this person winning the bid where he can build a swimming pool for £4.5 million as opposed to £20 million? And of course, a few years on, it was £5.5 million, but Sport England gave a £750,000 grant, and we built that swimming pool for near enough £4.5 million, and we gave jobs to local people. It was built by a local company. It was a consultancy. So what happens is that we've got to look at the procurement rules as well, because sometimes they're too strict in terms of getting the building. And I absolutely agree with my esteemed guest here that really when you get into small house builders, they are simply priced out of the market because they haven't got somebody sitting there with a computer system, whole department knowing how to fill out the forms, and then all you're left with is the big companies, because the small people can't even bid. And I think that is so important that we've got to look at not just the planning reform, but also the rules of procurement, because that will certainly unlock so much potential in the small and medium-sized businesses.
Definitely. And I think these conversations I've been hearing across conference about how some small changes could make a really big impact. But George, I know you and the Jobs Foundation spend a lot of time talking with businesses about what policy solutions they'd like to see that would really allow them to hire more people, take people from disadvantaged backgrounds and bring them into work, again boosting growth in the process. What are some of those policy solutions that business leaders tell you about?
Sure. I mean, I think a big policy area that the Jobs Foundation did a campaign for over the summer with 130 business leaders coming together, calling for a skills tax relief was something that we feel would make a huge difference to businesses across the country, particularly in terms of obviously supporting young people into work. We feel it would be relatively cost neutral and would really give businesses that extra layer of support to kind of help, give them that kind of first step on the ladder. So I think that's a big one. And obviously they're spoken about national insurance contributions already. So those are probably my two main ones.
I'm delighted to say that we have got Sir Stephen Timms joining us, Minister for Social Security and Disability. Not at all. We're delighted to have you. Obviously, you were high up in the press earlier in this year, whilst the government's welfare reforms were being mooted, and you've been brought in to lead the Timms review into how we can take forward that next step of welfare reform. Obviously, for your background, Stephen, we've been talking about the importance of boosting growth and how important that is for businesses to be able to get people back into work. But as Jazz mentioned earlier, there's also the stick that people mention of welfare reform that will also be needed to help support more people back into work. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how work on your review has been going on over the past few months?
I can certainly do that. Let me just make a few points about what we can do more generally to get
Perfect.
people working, to quote the name of our white paper from last April. Can I start by saying how much I value the work of SMEs for Labour? And I think this connection that you're providing between the party and the government and SMEs is a really important one. Not least because the point I was making in the meeting I've just come from, and maybe this is rather dated, but when I was employment minister, there was some fascinating research showing that of those people who succeed in moving from unemployment into employment, the great majority do so as a result of getting a job in an SME. But obviously big companies are doing a lot of recruitment, but on the whole they're recruiting people who are already in work. Those who are moving from unemployment into employment is SMEs to a large extent, a surprisingly large extent I think, who are enabling that to happen. Well, we've got this target of 80% rate of employment, the highest it's ever been. And it would boost prosperity in an equitable way, which is I think part of the reason why it's so attractive to us, and would create lots of new business opportunities as well. And an area where my department needs to work particularly closely with businesses is over skills development. We've now got in the Department for Work and Pensions responsibility for skills policy, apprenticeships and so on that's come over to us at the recent reshuffle. So that increases Jackie Smith, the minister's come over into our department with that responsibility, and that increases the levers that we've got. And the Get Britain Working white paper pointed out that 1/3 of annual productivity growth between 2001 and 2019 came from skills improvements. So that's a really important lever. But as you said, a big area of focus from my work is how we should support people who are out of work on health and disability grounds into employment. 2.8 million people at the moment, many of whom we know love to be at work if they could. So we need to improve employment support. We've committed to increase funding for that to £1 billion a year by the end of the Parliament. We need to revamp job centres, because the experience of going to a job centre has, for too many people, not been a very positive one in the last few years. We're changing Job Centre Plus to the Jobs and Careers Service. We're setting up a work coach skills academy. We want to invest in the skills of our work coaches, and we hope we're going to, and also to be able to provide much more personalised support, particularly to this group who've been out of work on health grounds. We've designated 1,000 of the Job Centre work coaches as pathways to work advisors to work specifically in a rather different way to support this group. We're removing work disincentives from the benefit system. There is at the moment a huge sort of trap or disincentive, work disincentive is the best way to describe it, that kind of forces people to aspire to be classified as incapable of work, because if they are, they get significantly more money. And we then abandon them. There's no extra help offered to them. What the Pathways to Work advisors are starting to do is ring up people in that situation, many of whom haven't really heard from the Job Centre for years. And I was talking to a couple of the Pathways advisors in Edinburgh recently, making the point that the responses they're getting from you are actually very positive. They're pleased to be offered a bit of help, which they haven't been for a long time. We commissioned for Charlie Mayfield, who used to run John Lewis, to conduct his Keep Britain Working review. We're expecting the results of that to be presented to us in the next few weeks, in the course of the autumn. And the question that we asked him is, what more can employers do to open up their workplaces to people who we know got a huge amount to offer, but are currently out of work because of barriers related to ill health and disability. And equally, how can we stop people far too often falling out of work when they run into a health problem in the course of their employment? And at the moment it's kind of taken as read almost that if you run into a health problem, or if you have to start caring for somebody, then you've kind of more or less got to give up your job. There's a bit of flexibility, and employers need support with this, I think. We'll see what Charlie Mayfield's going to say about it, but a bit of flexibility would enable them to carry on in everybody's interests. And greater availability of remote work certainly is an opportunity here. And so we're very, very keen to work with businesses, work with SMEs and larger businesses as well, to crack this specific challenge, government and business working together. Other countries have done so. Charlie Mayfield, I know, has spent some time looking at what has been achieved in Netherlands, where there's been a really dramatic reduction in the number of people out of work on health and disability grounds. We need to do the same. So I hope everyone's going to look out to Charlie Mayfield's report in a few weeks and see what everyone thinks of what he's proposing.
Thank you, Stephen. I think all your remarks there showed really just how much is going on in this space. Douglas, I know that you've written about welfare reform in your book and some proposals for how we might tackle the growing percentage of our economy that we're spending on welfare. Can you tell us a little bit about what you propose in the book?
I can tell you a little bit, but they're not that different from what Stephen's already talking about. I mean, I think everyone looking at this is looking at very similar options. I don't think that there's anything madly new. The only thing I would say is the financial implications of not doing anything are starting to get huge. They're starting to get huge from an employment point of view, they're starting to get huge from a fiscal point of view. And if we can't solve those problems, everything else is going to get worse. I think Rupa hasn't had enough say. I sort of feel I've been talking too much, so can I apologise?
Rupa, what are your thoughts on this?
So they haven't had any say. I'm curious to know who's in the room, what employers do we have, who. But yeah, no, I can just say, just echoing some of what everyone else has said. I went to see my job centre in Acton recently, and I was pleasantly surprised that they're actually a very interventionist one. So I think, Stephen, if you want to do a visit, come and see a model of what a job centre should do with people. And these things are not meant to be, I mean, look, we have also more food banks than branches of McDonald's in this country. That's a shocking statistic. We never used to hear of these at all before that last government, but they sort of. So I went to see both my food banks, because I have two boroughs now, and the Hammersmith and Fulham one, again, what you're saying as well, Douglas, to break a dependency culture. You shouldn't be reliant on these things. They're meant to be safety nets in a time of crisis. So they try and get people out. So there's work coaches and things in the food bank. There are debt advisors and all those, because often it's other services. It needs a joined up approach. So I would agree with pretty much most of what everyone said. I think your question before that was missed when you came down of what single measure would help. I mean, I do think that, a lot of good things that we have done, so trade deals with the US, with India and with the EU, it feels like we're still mopping up the mess of a very bad, hard Brexit deal. I'm a Democrat, I accept that that's the way the nation voted, but still, a lot of things, as I said, the good stuff in Rachel, some of the good things, Rachel, you've mentioned youth mobility. My first PMQ I had to this Prime Minister was about youth mobility. So some of those things, it seems we're still, and obviously if we had more frictionless trade, I represent a lot of people that do business with the EU, just sometimes it's not even worth import-export anymore, the amount of paperwork. I've had some horror stories, somebody who imports nuts, I think they're called Nuts and Co or something, a load of stuff was rotting at the border because we didn't have the right people to do the customs declaration. So more frictionless trade, yeah, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Thanks, Rupa. As you say, it'd be great to open out to the room for any questions. So any questions for any of the panel, to pop your hands up. Yeah, over here.
Thanks so much. Abby Chandra from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, where we're starting some work on support for self-employed people, particularly solo self-employed people. So this is a question to the whole panel, but also to you, Stephen. As we know, solo self-employed people are locked out of the safety net which employed people have access to. So they don't get sick pay, they don't get paternity pay, they've got kind of different experience pensions, and they don't have the same income protection which employed people have. We're really pleased to see the government's plans around the unemployment insurance which is being planned. So just to say, big thumbs up for that, and brilliant that self-employed people under current plans, as I understand it, will get access to that. So yeah, really hope that happens and is as generous as it can be. It would just be great to hear a bit more about the kinds of safety net available and what more government could do, because we know that can be a disincentive for sort of entrepreneurialism when people feel like there isn't that kind of risk backstop as it is for people taking up an opportunity in a job.
Thank you. Stephen, do you want to kick us off on that?
I think this is an important area. I mean, the Department for Work and Pensions used to support self-employment, doesn't anymore, or is it, it does in advice terms, but there's no programme anymore. When I was chairing the select committee, we recommended that should be brought back. And I think there is a case for that, not least for people who are managing health impairments or people flexibility that you have as a self-employed person is a real boon. So, as you say, we are going to be bringing in unemployment insurance. I'm coming to a meeting next week looking at some of the detail of that. I think there's some questions around sick pay as well that we need to look at. But it's, yeah, I think there is a lot of potential there, which at the moment we're not really. I mean, there are some good examples of employment support being delivered in a rather piecemeal way, specifically around self-employment. I think we need something a bit more systematic. And, what about using an element at least of this extra £1 billion a year we're providing for employment support to focus specifically on opening up self-employment opportunities? That's something we're keen to explore.
Relatedly on this, Stephen, there's been a number of articles over the past few days talking about how different people within government might like to see us move towards a more contributory form of welfare system. I know there's the Labour Together paper published last week that talks about this. Is that influencing your thinking inside government?
Well, to a degree. I mean, there is a bit more contribution in the system than is sometimes recognised, because of course the state pension system is still an importantly contributory one. Unemployment insurance will be contributory, but I don't think I'd expect us to go down a kind of a road of a big expansion of the contributory principle, largely because of the costs which would arise. So yeah, I think a bit of a movement in that direction, but we're not going to go huge.
Hot off the press. Douglas, did you have anything to add on that?
Well, it's an important area, but it's important from two different perspectives. One is the perspective of letting people in. Now, having been self-employed in my misspent youth, I know that it's a very lonely thing to be, and if something goes wrong, there's not very much there to look after you. So it is quite a frightening thing if you're self-employed, and obviously if you get a health condition or something like that, your situation is made a bit worse. And I think government's taking account of the fact that the nature of work now is much less the job for life and much more something that's flexible, where people sometimes work part-time, sometimes they work what you may think of as bad jobs or 0-hour contracts, but sometimes that's the best way to get people their step on the ladder. People may be doing a bit of consultancy, people may be working in SMEs, all these different things. I think it's so important that the welfare system takes account of that and makes it possible for the big variety of employment experiences that we now have in a modern world to be reflected in the way that welfare support is provided. And there's a lot of sort of hybrid stuff now going on where it's very difficult under some of the existing rules for you to be able to do a bit of work here and then claim a proportionate benefit but not the full amount. You often come up against a limit, and then you discover that perfectly viable employment opportunities disappear. And that's something that we have, I'm sure Stephen's very aware of it because he's nodding his head.
Well, of course, universal credit was intended to address
absolutely
with the taper and because with tax credits, we used to require you to do 16 hours a week. That isn't the case with universal credit. I think it's true that there's some other difficulties that have arisen with the way universal credit works. We're doing a review of universal credit at the moment, and I'm hoping that we can tackle some of them.
Good luck.
Thank you, Stephen. We're very quickly running out of time, but is there any other questions in the audience? Yeah.
In the event that the government does ban 0-hour contracts through the Employment Act, are there going to be any exceptions to that, opt-outs, for example?
Can you tell us your name and just roughly where?
Sorry, Ed Green, Matt from Horncastle.
Oh, okay. Delegate.
No, I'm the CLP chair.
Okay, cool. Well done.
Rupa, did you want to come in and answer that?
Actually, I think it's above my pay grade. I think esteemed minister will know.
than exploitative zero-hours contracts. So I think this is a sort of a different department to mine, but I think there are some people who zero-hours contract is exactly what they want. Students, for example, and others. People sometimes with caring responsibilities, it's ideal. But our problem is there are some people who are employed in zero-hours contracts who are actually doing pretty much the same thing week after week after week on Sunday, and never get the security of contracts, a regular contract. And that's what we want to deal with. There is, Douglas's point about the changing nature of the labour market, there is a growing problem about insecurity of all kinds of forms of employment at the moment. And we think we can deal with part of that, at least, by ban on exploitative zero-hours contracts.
I think we've got time for one more question if there's anybody in the room. Amazing. Well, I've got one last question then. One thing that we've not talked about today is how we can distribute the rewards of this economic growth and moving people into employment fairly across the country. Quick fire, can I have 20 seconds from everybody on how we can make sure that economic growth and job creation happens all over the country, starting with you, Rupa.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would say that we have a government who understands geography a bit better. So before levelling up, London, all three of us are London MPs, seem to not apply. Things like the Towns Fund, London was exempt. You have to understand that some of the poorest wards in this country are in the London boroughs that the three of us represent. So we need to look at geography and not just apply a crude thing, London bad, everywhere else good, based on the distribution of marginal seats and who needs to win what for an election.
Thank you. Douglas, 20 seconds, economic growth around the country.
Well, I'm going to look at it from a slightly different perspective. I think our biggest challenge is how to make tech work for us. And I see this as the challenge that's going to be fundamental to our societies over the next 10, 20, and probably even 50 years. And my fear is that we will end up with tech superpowers and no competition and growing inequality based on the fact that the tech superpowers will hoover up the wealth that we create. And so unless we find a way of making competition policy work, and competition is a very old-fashioned thing, and no one ever talks about it, it's not very sexy. But unless we find a way of making competition work, we won't get the benefits of the IT, I don't think.
Thank you, Douglas. Jazz.
I'm going to turn the question on its head and say business rates reform, because I think that absolutely needs to be done, because to have a level playing field, you look at the London business rates are sky high, and what we need to do is make sure that wealth that is going to be created is then distributed evenly. So business rates review is something that really needs to be looked at.
I think you could do a whole conference on business rates review. George.
You know what, I'm going to go back to something that the Barron said at the very beginning before he had to whisk away, but that jobs are the best route out of poverty. So it's enabling business as a force for good, creating conditions for it to thrive, and recognising that it's an absolute central partner to government to get people into work.
And Stephen.
Well, I agree with the point about competition, and I worked quite closely with Gordon Brown in our last government. He's very focused on making sure that competition is effective. A big part of the answer, but I think my truthful answer will be to say, well, let's deliver 80% employment. If we can do that, then that pretty much guarantees that we are spreading prosperity right around the country. Now, of course, the next question is, well, how do you do it? But I think setting that goal is the right one to aim for.
I think that is a very lovely note to end our panel on. Panellists, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and coming and discussing this topic. Thank you everybody for coming along. And if you can give a thank you to our panel.